Hi, welcome to Game On. I'm Mary Ullmann, Japhet.
And I'm Jenny Carnes, President and CEO of San Antonio Sports.
And I'm a board member at San Antonio Sports, and we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of San Antonio Sports and sharing some of the history of San Antonio Sports and also looking into our current sports scene and looking forward to the next 40 years. And our guest today is a great friend of San Antonio Sports. His name is Marc Klein. He's with a company called Populous, and it's almost too hard to explain. So we're just going to let Marc explain everything. So we're so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Love to be here. Love to be in San Antonio. Can't wait for the next 18 months or whatever we got left to get this thing going. So we have a great time when we're here, and I'm looking forward to it. And
so what
my team is.
Marc's referring to, of course, is the men's Final Four coming to San Antonio in 2025. But before we get into all of that and the nitty gritty of what you do, give us a little bit of your background. Born in Miami.
Sure. Speak to the camera, speak to you.
Speak to us.
Thank you. So Marc Klein, I'm a senior principal with Populous. Populous is actually the largest sports architecture firm in the world. So we build stadiums. We were the architects on the Alamo Dome and other facilities. But we also have a major events division. So our major events division out in Denver is the group that I work with.
Okay.
So, my background, very quickly. So born and raised in Miami, went to the Air Force Academy, wanted to fly jets, got injured, ended up at Georgia Tech. Studying physics of all things. And at that time, Atlanta was bidding for the 96 Olympics. And so 1990, I got sucked in, and 35 years later, I'm still in the major event industry.
Wow.
So I found my calling by chance that I ended up not being able to be in the Air Force, but ended up at a place and just found that fit.
You know, that's funny. It's kind of not dissimilar. I mean, we all kind of get sucked into this industry in odd ways. I came from LA in the television business, and I had been in the television business here. What I thought was a short-term gig for the U.S. Olympic Festival turned into a career, another career. It was kind of great. So I can relate to that.
Great.
So tell us,
Yeah, I want to give a little context to this. We hosted the 2008 Men's Final Four, which was the last Final Four in half of a dome stadium.
That's right.
And then it went on to Minneapolis, where the NCAA had this vision to put the court in the middle of a football stadium and grow attendance and grow the overall weekend. We didn't get to do that for another decade. So what we experienced in 08 to what we experienced in 18 was completely different. And that's how we got introduced to Populous. Yep. And the first time I met you, Marc, was September of 2016, when we officially kicked off our planning efforts for the 18 Final Four. And it was a whole different ballgame for us. I mean, we had no idea what to expect. The security, preparation, and everything that was thought through on how people moved in and out of the stadium was just so different. Yeah. So I think that's a good way to introduce what it is that you do for the Final Four, but just for events overall.
It's the perfect segue, Jenny, because essentially our major events division is just that. We work on major events, Olympics, Super Bowls, Final Fours,
really
both
major
men's and
events.
women's. And we're not called in to help with your 5K. We're not called in to help with your Farmers Festival. When an event reaches a point of complexity that they need a level of professionalism, that's generally where we come in to bring a level of planning and architecture principles to the event so that you can manage 60, 70, 80,000 people, put on a show that's going to be seen by 1 billion people, all the security, all the broadcast. The more complicated the event, the more the need is for someone like our team to come in and help wrangle 30 to 40 different functional areas and 5,000 staff members that are needed to service that event. So the Final Four, like you said, went from half house to full house. After a year or two, they said, we're in over our heads. We really need some professional help. And they reached out to us. We had been talking to them for years, and they were sort of, well, maybe.
They being the NCAA.
The NCAA finally said, they raised their hand and said, we backed ourselves into a fairly complicated corner. And this event means so much to the NCAA on an annual basis, as we all know, both financially and reputation-wise, that they said, we can't afford to not get it done at the highest possible level. Yeah. So that's where we came in. And that's generally the motto that we talk when people say, why do we need Populous? I say, well, if you got a square peg and you need to get it into a round hole, that's my job. And the worse the site, the harder the site, the more complicated the requirements that you have. If you're trying to do hospitality and pre-games and tailgates and trying to tie it all together, that's a very complicated operation, as both of you know so well. So you need someone who's kind of impartial, but also brings a level of professionalism professionalism and the tools, to plan something like that, because you can't just scrap it together. So that's where we kind of make our bread and butter, is at those level of events with a high level of complexity.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those complexities. San Antonio, not new to the Final Four, but y'all were new to our city
Correct.
when you first visited in September of 2016. So what was the first thing that you remember doing here? And I think we probably just walked around the building, we walked around downtown, but what do you recall?
So there's different, we look at the model. What type of city are we getting into? Walking versus driving. Well, that's the first thing we look at, because our job is to kind of wrap our arms around the entire event and help the NCAA picture what's got to happen from everywhere. You've got hotels, even from the airport side of things. You've got to look at the big picture. And with the large events that we do, the first thing that we do at that 18-month juncture for both Final Four and Super Bowl, it's a very standard thing, is the real estate grab. What are the big chunks of real estate that we're going to need to support this event, both from event space all the way down to parking, to boneyards, to tailgate? So you've got to look at those big programmatic items. And coming here, like, all right, we've got a walking city. That's the premise here.
Best thing about San Antonio.
That's right.
We love it. That and the river and everything else. So, yeah, it's okay. Now that you know you're doing a walking version, okay, how do we make sure that the people who come here have a great experience? We like to say, when we looked at your city and others, is we want to make the event feel like it lives here, not that we just crammed it in.
Yeah.
So that whole experience and tying in your downtown and all your walking routes and the river walk and the boats and everything else, and your existing facilities, because again, we're only 18 months out, so we're not building anything new. We got to take what you have and make it work. So that's what we saw with San Antonio. It's like, great, we've got another one of our walking style cities that we can get everybody downtown in a cohesive area and really have a great 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, and just for contrast, I mean, San Antonians who might be listening to this go, of course, we do have a walking city, but Phoenix this year is not a walking city.
Or Houston last year.
Or Dallas.
Correct.
Most of the host cities.
That's right.
There's really
That's
there's kind of 3 of them, honestly, that have that option. You're one of the 3.
Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Pat on your back.
Thank you for pointing that out, Mary.
Yeah. Well, just, because I think if you've been around some of our Final Fours, you kind of take for granted that you can leave the building, thanks to Populous, and be downtown with a margarita in your hand in half an hour.
And opposed to some of the other major events that we work, this is a collegiate event, and it's about college style feels of pep rallies and people all in the same colors and everything. So you guys allow that to happen here. Whereas in the driving cities, you don't see everybody till you get to the stadium or you get to an event. So here you get the chance to just casually see all these fans in one place, and it just provides a different feel. It really feels like a collegiate style event, as opposed to Super Bowl, which is a very hospitality only event.
Right.
I don't want to make this all about San Antonio. I mean, it is our podcast because, you get to work on Olympics or at least Populous does and some of these other major events. But when you got to San Antonio for the first time, what was the first biggest challenge that you saw in our city?
Really the land availability around the building.
The railroad tracks.
Look,
just lock us in.
Every site has their constraints, okay? Yeah. But the thing with the Final Four and most of these major events is the growth that they're having year on year. It's not a slow growth. It's a fairly fast growth. So our biggest challenge at every city we go to, and it doesn't matter even if it's a Houston or Phoenix where I've got 27,000 parking spaces, I'm still crammed for space in some form or fashion. So every city has those challenges. So just working. It's interesting. I always say, if anybody asks me what's the best service level in the business, I'd say the Alamo Dome. Because there's enough space down there for our program for the Final Four. We have a great amount of space down there. Now that's Marc with his technical hat on. You put Marc with his hospitality hat on, or his tailgate or exterior. There's some different.
We're lacking. Yeah,
you're lacking. Yeah. But we made up for it. Our job is to find the solution with what we're given. So you presented us that challenge, and obviously we had a unique situation where we did the entries across the street to free up space on the Alamo Dome side for those activations. So something that's never been done. Hey, it worked great. Do we need to do it again? We'll see. But yeah, it's fitting the things that the NCAA or any client needs into the footprint. But again, you're not unique in the challenge that you have. Other buildings have them too.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked with another facility where it had smaller lobby entrances and concourses similar to ours, where you had to open up the doors and let people in and out throughout the event, as we did? Have you ever done that in another city?
Oh, you're challenging me now. I'm trying to go back to the cities.
So once you came into that secured perimeter, your ticket was scanned. You were technically in the Alamo.
You're the only ones we've done it with.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
I would say Minneapolis had some challenges in that area because of the transport out front, where the perimeter kept changing a little bit based on the time of the day. So, but that was for different reasons. But we did a similar scenario there. Just again, their front door is bounded by a train. Lo and behold, another train causing us challenges. So Minneapolis is probably the closest, but inside the building was fine. But we had to change that perimeter back and forth.
So I want to bring up another example that, for the audience listening, they have no idea that all of this goes on. And this was a big project for our team and your team in 2018, is where those 5,000 service people parked, how they got to the dome. We don't have that many parking spaces to begin with.
Right. And
we reserve those for the NCAA and their fans and coaches and buses. So talk about that Wolf Stadium project.
So I don't remember the Wolf Stadium.
Where we parked everybody at the baseball stadium.
Okay, I didn't remember the name of it. Thank you.
Sorry.
So look, I'm a very big proponent in that if your staff shows up with a smile on their face, they're going to deliver good services. So when we worked with you all and work with every building, honestly, to make sure that we can get the right number of people in the building ready to go and deliver a great day. So it's a big project to ensure that we get those staff collected at a location, get them on a bus, get them to the building, make sure they have their credentials, get them to the briefing area, and then on post. So it's not something we take for granted, because if your staff shows up grumpy, they're not going to get better during the day.
during their 12-hour shift.
No. So it's a big point of focus to ensure that we really take care of those 5,000-ish folks that are there to really deliver that experience, so that the focus can solely be on the student athletes having a great time on the court.
For the last 4 decades, San Antonio sports has dared this community to dream big through the transformational power of sport. For 40 years, we've inspired youth to get in the game, motivated San Antonians to live healthy, been a force behind places to play, and hosted events that impact. As we celebrate 40 years of dreaming big, we invite you to dream big along with us. To support our mission, donate today at sanantoniosports.org.
What always fascinates me and might mean something to the folks who are listening is the terms ingress and egress that, I just didn't use until I got into this business.
You didn't know ACP and VCP.
Well, let's stop there real quick, because we're throwing out some things that nobody knows.
Right.
What is an ACP and what is a boneyard?
Access control point. So an ACP is a place where you would enter the perimeter and go through some sort of screen to get you in. Right. Okay. A boneyard is a location to park unused trucks and vehicles that were part of the load in, and we need them ready there for load out. So a boneyard that's what that is.
That's great.
And our fans just thought they scanned their ticket,
went to
buy their popcorn. That was it.
And that's all they should focus
It's all they should know.
Well, and in truth, if we all are doing our jobs well, and particularly you and your crew,
they don't even know Populous exists, right?
It's funny. One of our biggest mantras in our industry is stay in the shadows. We are not the show. Our job is to build the stage for the client to deliver their product and let them put on their show. And the show in this case is the men's Final Four. So very big part of what we do is that stay in the shadow, but build the stage, again, for the client to put on a great show, but also for everybody to think there's always been a basketball court in the Alamo Dome. It fits perfectly. We have it all fits. So again, that's the magic I think that we try to pull together, is to make the event feel like it belongs and lives here, as opposed to something that was just dropped in with no thought.
But back to ingress and egress.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I just think it's fascinating talk about how you move that many people in, that many people out, and what kind of goes into
and the people models that y'all go through.
So again,
trigonometry
and again, this is one of the differentiators for Populous isn't a Populous commercial, but that's why we have architects on our staff, because there are code and life safety issues when you're dealing with 50, 60, 70,000 people. But it's also about that fan experience. So as you know, it's interesting. People don't realize the slowest part of ingress is ticket scan. Okay. So I can process a lot of people in through a magnetometer and an X-ray, but if the ticket scan doesn't keep up, then you have a bottleneck. So in San Antonio, as you know, we separated them out and put some distance between them, which allowed the staggering of the flow. So it all works into those kind of calculations to ensure that, again, if it's a bucket list event, mom, dad, son, daughter, whatever the case may be, are coming to this event, we want them to get through that checkpoint. We have to be safe. We want them to get through as quick as possible. So the NCAA challenges us no more than 5-minute wait time. So our design parameters are, if somebody shows up at any given time, they shouldn't wait in line more than 5 minutes, which is a pretty low number in the scheme of things.
I wish every event was that efficient.
Now, again, sometimes we meet it and sometimes we don't, I'll be honest, because sometimes there's flow. But when we look at what we do here with you all, for example, when we had crowds out in the convention, so we put hospitality out in the convention center. So our run of show times the releases of those individual groups so that we don't overload our entries. So there's a lot of science behind it. We also here, and I'll go some market and commerce, and we had valves where we were sending people. Like if we had an entry that was crowded, we had people on the corners that would say, keep going that way, go to the next entry. So there's a human component of that, so that you valve the entries so that if you see a backup, you don't send more people to the backup. So there's a lot of real-time command decisions being made to ensure that we level our flows across the entries. So it is a lot of science. We do run a piece of software. I know Jenny's seen it, that we do model all this, and it goes right to the men's basketball committee. They see it. And that model, it's amazing how accurate it has proven itself, that showing the time bases and where we're going to get crowds and when we would be hitting the switch to, flip to this street or that street.
This is the thing. I've always geeked out on this. I just find it fascinating that there is such science. So when you're standing in line for your ticket, a whole lot of people have been thinking for a long time
months and months,
about how we make that as easy as possible.
And again, it's like we want the event to feel like it lives here. We don't want you to feel like, oh, they just crammed me into an alley to screen in and I'm packed in with 5,000 of my closest friends. So it is all about that. We say first touch, last touch. So from the moment someone lands at your airport to the moment they leave from your airport, they should feel like, wow, that was a great 5-6 days.
So game day. Talk about where you are and what you're monitoring, what you're seeing, and what you're doing.
Sure. So I'll start off with a little funny discussion. So game day, I've got a dozen or 15 people that work for me, and they'll put up 28, 30,000 steps. On game day, I'm up in a control booth with the leader of NCAA, and I count my steps with how far the buffet is from my desk. So I'll do 250 steps.
It's good to be the boss.
It's good to be the boss. It's good to be the king. So the stadium will run 2 different operation centers. So if you go to an Alamo Dome event today, they have a stadium command center that has your police, your fire, your building services. That continues to run. Okay. But in a major event, NCAA and NFL are very similar. They will set up their own, what they call a control booth. That is really to run their event. The building runs their bits and pieces, when the kitchens are running and those kind of things. But we're dealing with our constituents. So when are we opening gates? When are we bringing in the teams? What time we turn in the lights on for the court? All the production elements. So that's a very small group. There's about 8 or 9 of us up in that room. So LJ Wright, who's the director of men's basketball, is the chief. It is his event. We are there to support him. So LJ will have myself to ensure the things that we have built are ready to go. So I like to say our job on that day is to make sure the things we've designed are ready to deliver what they were designed for. So I'll have a team on the ground. So the ingress and egress and things like that. We'll have transportation, the NCAA's transportation team, the NCAA security. We'll have stadium staff up there to integrate with us. We'll have camera operators. So we are strictly focused on the operation of the game, meaning from doors to doors, essentially, to make sure all the NCAA's constituents are cared for. Everything from the future host tour that's coming through to the broadcasters, making sure that the blimp timing is right, whatever the case may be. So we've got to run a show. We're all on radios. We got cameras. It looks like a little NASA launch center up there.
So
fascinating.
Awesome. So cool.
We won't put you on the spot. So favorite Final Four city outside of San Antonio?
I'd say it's Atlanta. Because they're one of those 3 that we talk about, where you can get that buzz of people, concentrated people into a central location. So they're similar to you in the footprint style, where we've got everything in one spot. And I did an Olympics in Atlanta, and I lived there for 15 years, so I know it pretty well. Actually, I love the Georgia Dome. Georgia Dome was probably my favorite venue because Carl Atkins ran an immaculate facility. But yeah, I'd say Atlanta's second. Yeah.
What would you describe as one of the scariest or craziest moments you've seen, worked through, that you had?
Sure. I'll give you one that's relevant now. So Phoenix is in 2017. It was the start of halftime of the championship game. So it's Monday evening.
I was there. I'm getting nervous about this.
And we basically had a microburst tornado hit the west side of the building and took down a 40-foot truss that completely blocked our main exit route to the west side of the building. Well, you didn't know because I immediately was like, I missed the second half of that game completely because myself and my team were completely focused on getting a crew out there, clearing the space. We had no injuries, luckily. One was close. So literally this tower came down and landed with a woman right in the arc of it.
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
So it was a recorded microburst. I mean, it was so from an insurance purpose, because I've been deposed on all this, as you can imagine. So the weather event was an actual one, so it wasn't a failure of anything. But yeah, it was a 40-foot truss over the complete, over a 6-lane road that came down, and we had to clear that space and make different plans to get half of the building out through that entry. So we had 45 minutes to figure that out.
Well done, because I had no idea.
Really? No kidding. Impressive. That's great.
And I mean, the other one that most people are probably more aware of was in the Super Bowl when the power went out in New Orleans. I was in the building command center that stayed alive in terms of power. So I was with the engineers as we were troubleshooting the problem on the live side of the building, because NFL control was on the dead side of the building. They lost their power.
Oh my goodness.
So for about 45 minutes, that was probably another crazy 45 minutes of my life trying to answer all those calls and get Andy Katz out of the room where they were trying to actually fix the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember being, I think it was the 05 men's Final Four in Indy, or maybe 06. Because Baylor won the women's Final Four in 05, and I was, anyways. So they all run together after a while.
I don't even know who played in
so it was the old RCA Dome, right, in Indy, that was the bubble.
That's,
where
LJ worked.
So semifinal night, made it through the games. I don't remember who was playing. And then we go to our future host meeting Sunday morning, and the man that used to run college basketball for the NCAA, I remember him talking about same thing. There was a tornado threat, and trying to make the decision, do we evacuate the building? Because it was that air pressured, inflated ceiling at the RCA Dome. And they just went with it, and they made the decision to keep us all inside, finish out the games. I mean, have you ever had to make a call like that? I can't even fathom the stress.
I can tell you, and I got to be careful with this one. I can tell you I was part of discussions for an event where we were seriously discussing holding the event and not bringing spectators into the building due to life safety issues outside the building.
Wow.
So that was an actual discussion, and I was my eyes were like, are we actually having this discussion as a contingency? And it was a valid contingency to have, where we were 2 days out from hosting this event, worldwide audience, very big level event, where we were saying there's a high chance we will not be able to let people in the building. We'll have to do this event just for broadcast purposes. And that's a hairy meeting when you're thinking about the amount of money that was invested in those ticket holders and the travel and everything else. So,
oh my goodness.
But it starts with life safety. I mean, nobody's going to argue that.
Hi, I'm Vince Davis, a journalist here at the San Antonio Express News. It's now time to nominate your 2024 SA Light. SA Light's honorees work selflessly in the community, lifting others through their acts of service, innovation, and collaboration. If you know someone like this, nominate them today at expressnews.com/SA Lights.
Well, we were all talking about how we do enjoy sharing our experiences with younger people. I would venture to say most people don't know that a job like yours exists.
Correct.
So what is the career track that you would,
jump off an airplane and hurt your feet in the Air Force? This is the first step, because that's what no, I would not recommend that. Look, I do talk to college-age kids a lot on this, and the first thing I tell them, you're looking at a gentleman who's been in this industry for 35 years. I've never applied for a job in my life. So what that tells you is the relationships and the connections you make are what's really going to find you that path. The second part is, as a young, the reason I got in this is I went and said, that's cool. I'm going to go volunteer for that. I just want to be involved in something. I got involved in a student group at college to help support IOC visits to the Georgia Tech campus to support the bid.
For the Atlanta
Olympics, while we were bidding.
Yeah.
So I just got involved and started volunteering and getting involved in events and like, well, this is fun, and just kept going and making those connections. And it has carried me through my entire career. So I would say get out there and doesn't matter what level of you can volunteer as a water person at a marathon event, or you can, any exposure you can get at some of these events will tell you, one, if it's for you, but then it helps the event. The events need volunteers. We live off volunteers. Mm-hmm. We cannot do our job without them. So, but finding those, if you're going to be in this industry, you're going to start volunteering somewhere. You're not going to just walk in and get a paid job. I had a chat with somebody a couple of weeks ago. He called me and said, "Can you tell me give me some career advice?" And he wants to be in professional sports. And I said, I guarantee you, every company you've talked to has wanted you to be into ticket sales.
Yep.
Every time.
Yep.
And I was like, and that's okay if that's the route you want to go. But if you want to get in, as an operations level person, go volunteer. Go just volunteer to be the grounds crew for an event. Go help at a tailgate just by, serving drinks or setting up, fence or something. So just get out there and see what the opportunities are in the events. And if you are good at it, you will make those connections and be gregarious. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've never interviewed for a job. Every job I've had has come to me because, we talked to him and we like that what we're doing and we'll have a chat. So get out there and experience the events on the service side of it.
That's awesome.
So
go ahead.
Well, if you have a follow up on that,
go.
Are we coming about to close here?
Yeah.
Well, I was just, we talked about some scary moments and some hard decisions, but our mission at San Antonio Sports is to transform our community through the power of sport. And I think I already know the answer that will follow this question, but can you pick a defining moment in your career or playing sports growing up yourself that transformed your life through the power of sport?
I guess it was my first work in the Olympics and in Atlanta. So I'd never worked a major event at all. And I got into this event and the village opens. So we opened 2 weeks prior to the Olympics, for training and all that. And I saw, and this sounds so cheesy, but I saw all these nations and people just come together, different colors, different shirts, sizes, ages. And it was like, I've helped these people reach the pinnacle of their career. Like I'm helping them do what their dream was. And I'm getting choked up about it because, wow. I mean, if you can help someone achieve their dream, what else could you say is great? Like, I just saw that and go, wow, look what I helped them do. These guys are going to go out and compete for 2 weeks. It's their dream. It's the Olympics. And I did that at multiple levels after that. I became a coach for a water polo team. And I want to help these athletes achieve what their dream is. And if I can be part of that, that's just, what else could you ask for in life?
That's why we all do what we do. Outstanding finish.
That is fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Marc.
Absolutely.
And it gives us so much comfort to know you're behind the scenes with us for the next few months as we get ready for the men's Final Four in 2025.
No, looking forward to it. I cannot wait to get back here. So let's get this Phoenixing out of the way and on to San Antonio.
And game on.
Game on. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. And thanks to the Express News for hosting us in their beautiful podcast studio. See you next time.